what's on the camera as well as over here. By the way, hello. Hello to my friends on YouTube and Google. Hello to my friends on Periscope. I am going to try and clean this camera, so just give me a second here, Periscope. Like, I can't figure out why it looks like shit. Anyway, this is Anything Can Happen Thursday on cBas After Dark. I'm on Google, I'm on YouTube, and on Periscope Live, taking your calls, taking your comments. This is not a monologue. It's a talking head show, yeah, but you can call in, area code 310-776-5869. I'll give it a bunch. Area code 310-776-5869. You can just comment if you're on the Periscope feed. You can send me a tweet at Sebastian Kuntz. I see the hearts. Gobble. Wait, how do I do this? Gobble, 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 gobble. It's a very funny thing. The hearts kind of go up in a little fluttering motion on the screen on Periscope. And when people send hearts, I like to do this and gobble them up like a Pac-Man thing. It's stupid, but it's something I actually saw from the guy who does the sock puppet show. There's a guy who does a sock puppet show that's actually pretty damn unique. I won't say it's funny, but it's kind of unique on Periscope, and it's kind of my favorite thing. It's one of my favorite things. Periscope's a very unique. I mean, you keep thinking the internet's not going to come up with anything new, right? Like you keep thinking that the internet's just going to be kind of Google and Facebook, but Facebook, there was a time when Facebook was new. There was a time when Twitter was new, and now this Periscope thing, because everybody has the forward-facing camera here, or here, that I don't know. It's going to be a game changer, and I really think that. So now I'm adding a third outlet to the nightly show where I talk about a bunch of bullshit that nobody seems to care about. Well, that's not true. Like Monday I do nerd news. Tuesday's game show rerun Tuesday. Wednesday is usually Media Watch Wednesday, but last night I wasn't feeling it. And now tonight is Anything Can Happen Thursday. I have a bunch of news stories I want to talk about, and I've sort of flagged them and saved them up, and we can just sort of go through it here. The first one is Bitcoin. Do you know what this Bitcoin is? Does anybody if anybody's an expert on Bitcoin, I would love to talk to you. Please call 310-776-5869. That is area code 310-776-5869. Now, of course, the story that I wanted to bring is no longer in my little here we go, Bitcoin. Okay, here we go. This is from Sky News. I'm going to have to look at the date to see exactly when this story is from, but I think it's a modern news story here. Let me pull it up on the screen. I will show you guys on Periscope briefly, but it's really hard to get a screen grab. If you want to see the full news stuff that I'm doing, go to youtube.com/Sebastian Central, or just do a search for cBas After Dark. cBas After Dark. cBas After Dark. All one word. Okay. A Secret Service agent skimmed 500,000 pounds, not the weight, because Bitcoins have no weight. They're not real physical money, but they are 50, as in London, as in British money pounds. Why did I hear a ding just now? What the hell's the ding? Oh, is that the screen sharing ding? Okay, fine. Let me show you guys on Periscope as well exactly what I'm talking about. Skimming, I guess that would be $1 million, right? Because every pound in England is worth $2 in the United States, I think. Here we go. From the good folks at Sky News, Secret Service agent skims 500,000 pounds in Bitcoins. One of the investigators helped shut down the black market site Silk Road, transferred illicit Bitcoins to his personal account. I think it's a bit like, a drug cop, like a drug busting cop, taking the drugs and money for his own. I guess it wasn't quite $1 million. It was $800,000, but a U.S. Secret Service special agent accused is to plead guilty. And again, the date. I love that little graphic for Bitcoin. I don't think that's just like a graphic, because Bitcoins are not real things. 18 June. This is about a week old now. This is from last Thursday. Sean Bridges. Is this a picture of him? Oh, that's founder Ross Ulbricht, who went to jail for life after the Silk Road thing. The Bitcoin was transferred. He moved the virtual currency from the Silk Road accounts to his own, it is claimed. They were then converted to US dollars, transferred twice before eventually landing in his bank account. Not that guy, the Secret Service guy. He was only caught because Bitcoin and payment companies became suspicious about the amount of virtual currency he was converting. The plea deal will see him admit to money laundering, obstruction of justice. I guess my earlier statement about I need to become a Bitcoin skimmer is not true because, yeah, apparently you get caught pretty easy with the... And I love this, by the way. The Silk Road Anonymous Market, which is gone now, but you can check out... This is a screen grab of it, apparently. You can get... oops. No, I'm hitting my own thing here. Cannabis, dissociatives, ecstasy, opioids, precursors, psychedelics, stimulants. I'm I'm not a drug user, really. Like, I'm not an alcohol drinker. I don't really like most drugs, how they make you feel, but I just really am delighted and amused at that menu. You don't ever see it, you know. It's something you never ever see. Is this drugs, cannabis, dissociatives, ecstasy, which is that really its own? It shouldn't be its own category, I don't feel like, but okay, fine. Ecstasy is its own category, maybe due to popularity, I don't know. Psychedelic stimulants, prescription, and then over here, let me just show you again. I will show the folks on YouTube as well. This amuses the hell out of me because on the right, let me hit share here. You've got like little pictures. It's like eBay for pictures. Here's 100 grams of 84% ecstasy MDMA, generic Xanax, pure oxycodone in powder form, testosterone, cyprinate, methylone, Suboxone. I don't even know what that is. Could be a painkiller, could be something else. But like you just never see a drug menu like that, and I think that's really amusing. Silk Road founder Ross Ulbricht was sentenced to life in prison in May for running the $214 million criminal enterprise. Prosecution claimed during the trial that when Ulbricht discovered an employee had become a government witness, he arranged for him to be killed. The supposed hitman that he contacted was in fact a government agent. Ulbricht's family said his legal team was not allowed to introduce evidence of the corrupt officer during his trial, and that could be one of the grounds for his appeal. I don't know how the corrupt officer stealing the... It's like, it's just like the story I was saying a minute ago about how a drug cop will sometimes steal either the drugs or the money from a drug dealer. And that's kind of like the lawyer for the drug dealer saying, yeah, but this cop stole the drugs and the money. And it's like, well, that doesn't change the original charges against you, does it? Like, that doesn't really change anything. 310-776-5869 is the phone number you can call if you'd like to be on the show. And if you'd like to tweet me, of course, that's at Sebastian Kuntz. If you'd like to Periscope me, I am live on Periscope right now, and it's the same feed. Really, the better feed is the YouTube and Google Plus feed, because I feel like that's where you can see the screen shares more clearly. That's where you can do lots of sort of it. And you can see the phone number clearly without me having to say 310-776-5869, 310-776-Kuntz. All right. Let me just change my name in this chat room here to Sebastian, and then enter my password because now I've registered the nickname. Okay. Back to the show. You're making you guys sitting through all that like a bunch of bullshit. That's just not what we were supposed to do. And I just hit play on Star Trek. Yes, I did. We could just watch Star Trek, maybe. I don't really know if I feel it. No, I do feel like doing a show. I got a shit ton of news stories I want to talk about. And I don't know why I can't talk about any of them. Well, I can. Here's another good one. And this probably ought to be saved for the folks when I do like Nerd News Monday, maybe, because I feel like Uber and similar ride-sharing services ought to probably go in the nerd news category. But man, I'm all over the place tonight. My apologies. This is sort of Space Cadet City here, and I don't really like for that to be what's going on. But here's another story I really like. It's the one I was talking about, the Uber drivers. A California labor ruling just said an Uber driver is an employee. That is Uber's worst nightmare. So let's talk about it. Oh, man. Okay. In what could be an explosive decision, the California Labor Commission has found a driver for Uber in San Francisco is an employee of the company. That's from a ruling filed in state court Tuesday, first reported by Reuters. It's pretty damning. Quote, defendants hold themselves out as nothing more than a neutral technological platform designed simply to enable drivers and passengers to transact the business of transportation, the commission writes. The reality, however, is that defendants are involved in every aspect of the operation. The driver is Barbara Berwick. She's been awarded roughly $4,000 in unpaid expenses plus interest. Uber is appealing. Uber's spokesperson says that the Labor Commission's decision is non-binding and applies only to a single driver, but it probably sets a bit of a precedent. The threat that Uber's drivers could be deemed employees in the eyes of the law is a problem for Uber. Their vast business and multi-billion dollar valuation fundamentally depends on its assumption that drivers are, say it with me, independent contractors and not employees. When drivers are treated as contractors, they carry the bulk of the company's operating cost. Uber drivers are required to pay out of pocket for insurance, routine car cleanings, maintenance, gas. It all adds up. While Uber has boasted that drivers in certain markets like New York can earn as much as $90,000 driving on its platform, after expenses are added, that gets a lot lower, obviously. Just as importantly, drivers who are contractors are required to get benefits and other labor Drivers who are contractors and not employees are not required to get benefits or other labor protections that employees are traditionally awarded. They're calling it the 1099 economy. It's another thing that helps keep costs low, rides cheap, and thin margins viable. Determining whether workers should be classified as contractors or employees is rarely a simple matter. Uber points to its drivers' abilities to set their own schedules as evidence they operate independently and should not be considered traditional employees. Drivers, on the other hand, argue Uber sets strict standards for how many rides they need to accept while on the road and how they ought to interact with passengers, and reserves the right to deactivate their accounts, basically the equivalent of firing them if they don't comply. If they don't set strict standards for how many rides they need to accept while on the road and how they ought to interact. So if they don't follow those rules, they can get fired. In California, where the issue of whether drivers for Uber and Lyft is headed to trial, U.S. district judges have in two separate rulings declined to make a final decision. Why? The test the California courts have developed over the 20th century for classifying workers isn't very helpful in addressing this very 21st century problem. So until now, the big scary question, one that could decimate Uber and Lyft and all the 1099 companies, has basically remained a hypothetical, which is why it's so important the California Labor Commission has finally stepped in to say, yes, this Uber driver is an employee and she's owed $4,000. Imagine if Uber suddenly had to pay $4,000 back to all of its drivers. Even its $5.9 billion in funding would presumably wilt at the thought. It is undeniable that Uber drivers becoming employees would be a huge blow to Uber's business model. What we still don't know is how huge. The article has been this article has been updated to include a statement from Uber. So, yeah, isn't that fascinating? Like, I think it's really going to be an interesting thing to see. I'm actually a 1099 worker now, and I'm an independent contractor. I teach English classes online to adult learners of English as a second language in all Latin American countries. It seems to be that this business is grouped by groups of nations. So there's the Latin American people who teach English. There are the people who do it for Asian countries like Japan, China, Korea. I don't know about China as much. Actually, I don't even really know that much about Korea. Korea is the one place where I've had a friend who taught English online. So I still have not got my first paycheck. This was my first week as a teacher for adult learners of English as a second language on the internet. But I will say, it is not video, right? And I mean, I'm pretty presentable. I'm used to being on camera. There would be nothing wrong with me being on video. I was expecting it to be on video, but turned out it's not. And I think that's pretty fascinating to me because now I'm able to just use my voice, right? One of my students, I am still floating on air from having this compliment paid to me by one of my students who said, at first I thought he was just asking me, how do you say someone has a nice voice? And I said, well, you can say, I get that all the time. How do you say this? How do you say that? One of my students asked, how do you, what is the word for the interview you have when someone is either quitting or being fired? The last paycheck and stuff like that. Hang on, I got to get something. I need to get an ice pack out of the freezer. All right. One of the things I found is that my device, my Windows tablet here, tends to overheat. And lately I've been sort of putting an ice pack on it to kind of cool it off, or at least balance out the temperatures just enough. And tonight's actually a really cool night, so it's not going to be a problem. But anyway, one of my students is all, how do you say someone has a great voice? And I said, well, you could say you have a great voice. You could say you have a deep voice. You could say you have a mellifluous voice. I'm using all my English teacher tricks and stuff. And they thought that was, they seem to like that. They think that's cool. But he turned it around and said it to me, which I was not expecting. Like, it was actually really something. He's like, you have a mellifluous voice. You sound, who's it? Oh, yes, Morgan Freeman. He said, you have a voice like Morgan Freeman. I was like, dude, you just made my week with that compliment. That was tremendous. Thank you so much. So yeah, that was really a very special thing that I felt like, wow, just wow. I go through life working really hard. It's not always easy. It's certainly tough not being able to do the job I thought I was going to do, which is, I thought I was going to do this job the rest of my life, of course, meaning journalism. And turns out, well, guess what? After 20 years, many places don't seem to want me. And I talked about this before here. But then, as it turned out, I needed a break anyway. I needed to kind of step away from journalism and be like, let's see if I can learn a new skill. After 20 years of doing one thing, that can get a little tiring. And sure enough, I became an English teacher in Mexico. But then I spent a year doing that, and I was very, very homesick. More so, I think, than most people are when they do that kind of job. And I don't know, I came back to the United States without a job, and then was like, wow, I found this link to maybe be an online English teacher. I thought, and the funny thing about it is openenglish.com is like the biggest competitor to the company I used to work for. They have commercials all over the Latin American countries. And the great thing about that is that at the end of the commercial, they have this really sexy hot lady. Just super, super sexy hot chick. And I think in some of those, she might even be wearing like a bikini or something like that. But she says, and the last line is tattooed on my brain. This is how good this is. She's all, Profesores Americanos 24 horas del día. Now, if you speak any Spanish at all, you know that what that is American professors 24 hours a day, right? Profesores Americanos 24 horas del día. But they don't say it with a good accent, and they could have. This is an intentional sort of marketing gimmick, I'm pretty sure. They don't say Profesores Americanos 24 horas del día. They say Profesores Americanos 24 horas del día, the way an American speaking Spanish would say it, with that kind of an accent. And for me, that was just this weird detail on this commercial that was really funny. And now I'm one of the Profesores Americanos 24 horas del día. There's a bit of an accent thing at work there, and I think that's really funny. Okay. Let us go to the story about the Spock documentary. Again, this should be saved for the nerd news, but it's anything can happen Thursday, and we can do nerd news on Thursday and not have it be the end of the world. Okay. Pardon me. Brought to you by Belch Beer. When you want a good beer, Belch Beer. Dr. Pepper Vanilla, which is not as good as I thought. I think it's actually based on the can. It's like a red, white, and blue themed can. I'm pretty sure it's like a 4th of July thing. and it's not as tasty as I thought it would be. But then I found that if you put a scoop of vanilla ice cream in it, that sends it into the stratosphere. Like, it is really, really spectacular when you do that. All right, let's talk about the Mr. Spock documentary, as I'm calling it. It's not a Mr. Spock documentary. It is the Mr. Spock documentary. Maybe you've heard about this. I will talk about it more on Monday, but I really like this article. I saw him, Adam Nimoy, on, what was it? It was like Good Day LA or something. It was the local news in Southern California. I still find myself watching the local news in Southern California and the Bay Area a lot. They really do very good local news there. Anyway, Adam Nimoy is the only person who can both claim to be the first Trekkie and the son of Spock. Not that the dual existence was always easy. My relationship with him, having Spock in the house, this is a very difficult proposition for a young boy, Nimoy told Mashable. He's now 58 years old, Adam Nimoy. The TV director and documentary producer has got a crowdfunding thing to complete For the Love of Spock, a documentary about his late father and a love letter to Leonard Nimoy's millions of fans around the world. Obviously, those movies that J.J. Abrams directed are shit, 2009 and 2013. That guy's a piece of garbage and was using Star Trek as a springboard so he could direct Star Wars. But it's still, cool that Nimoy was in it, I guess. It was strange then for the 8-year-old Nimoy. His father was busy creating a character unlike any that had existed before on network TV. Blah, 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 blah. His son got the best opportunity to see him on set in 1964 as they were preparing the first pilot. I was into it. I'm a fan. I'm the first Trekkie, he said, adding that he was on set and captured publicity stills. He was so thrilled that he was completely hooked before the show was even on the air. I mean, anybody who knows the Star Trek history, any Trekkie is going to be bored by some of this because you know it already. But Nimoy was the son of Russian immigrants, grew up poor, and even as the series took off, he worried this could be over quickly. Nimoy worked as hard as he could to generate money. When Star Trek ended, he found new work on Mission Impossible. He was working so much he was not home a lot, and his son seems to be kind of lamenting that in this article. And then it slowed down, just like in Shatner's case. Nimoy also saw in the early and mid-'70s a few years where stuff was pretty dim. Now, I'm going to stop here for a second. Because, and he's going to come back to cBas, because all roads lead back to cBas, as my boss John Scott once told me. And I'm not sure it was meant to be a compliment, but since I'm such the narcissist, it kind of was in a weird backhanded way. And I talked about this on Game Show Tuesday. But when I see, and I mean, stuff like that really resonates with me now that I'm having this kind of dim spot in my career, because it feels like, and again, I've said thanks many times to my old buddy Rhino in Denver on the number 2 station on the radio in Denver now. Thanks to him, like it was his sort of work and humor and sort of ability that launched this small mom and pop station from like 17th place in the ratings to number 2 in the course of only a couple of years. He's really a great guy, and he's the first guy I really worked with on the radio. I was his producer, and I think I've even played the clips on this show before. Anyway, Leonard fucking Nimoy had a weak couple of years after Star Trek before the movie. I think that's when he did In Search Of, like he did some work. So it's not like he was jobless, but it was not maybe work that he was proudest of. Shatner, same thing. Shatner, I think, had an even worse time than Nimoy did, because Shatner was doing stuff like, not promotional films, but like, I mean, this is pre-T.J. Hooker, right? T.J. Hooker was a pretty big boon for him, I think, in the 80s and 70s, or maybe just the 80s. But I feel like I take a little bit of solace, I guess, or I find it comforting to find that even Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner, the two people in the world I probably look up to more than anybody else, that hey, everybody goes through a down spot in their career, and look how they came back. Leonard Nimoy obviously went on to direct movies and do a lot of stuff. William Shatner, same thing to a lesser degree, but then William Shatner went on to be a lot of television roles, including the one that I say, to this day I will say this, and I think I'm right, that was better than Captain Kirk for him. Denny Crane in Boston Legal. Boston Legal is a lawyer show by David E. Kelly, but it is wildly hilarious, A, and B, he plays this like pre-Alzheimer's former rock star lawyer. Like he was a rock star in his heyday. Now he's in his 60s. He's a big fat cat lawyer. His name's on the door, but he's kind of just barely starting to lose it as far as his mind is concerned. And it is continuing. It is a 5-year series where it kind of continues to sort of be a plot, and it's wildly funny for one thing. Like they give him lines and things to do in the show that are fucking spectacular. But on top of that, it's like the role that it was born to play. Like he's a little bit of a doughy fat guy now, and that is perfect for this role. You know, I'm not saying that he's playing William Shatner as Denny Crane, but I'm saying as far as fitting into the role so completely perfectly, the way the role is shaped is like the role was written for him essentially. I feel like even Captain Kirk doesn't meet that standard. Like he really is Denny Crane in a number of ways, and it was just so. I mean, he's funny, a little bit washed up, a little bit of a has-been. His rock star days are behind him, but he's still doing it. Well, it turned out that playing that turned him into an even better rock star. You know, like he's just so good. If you would like a TV show to watch that you haven't seen, please let me recommend Boston Legal. If you like stuff that's dramatic but mostly funny, you know, a dramedy, if you like that stupid-ass word, which I don't, but the comedy is really the important part of that. The drama, which is there and well-written, very good drama, but it's mostly about the comedy. It's touching at times. It's hilarious at times. Shatner's amazing. I'm not a big, huge James Spader fan, but he's good. And Rene Auberjonois, the guy who plays Odo in Deep Space Nine, is in it as a pretty regular role. Like there's just so much to love about Boston Legal. Also, Candice Bergen from Murphy Brown is astounding. She's so good and so dramatic, but so hilarious. Like I can't just say she's a good actress and she's good in the dramatic parts of the role and she's funny in the comedy. She's wildly hilarious at the comedy, just like William Shatner is, and she's like tear-generatingly serious and touching at the poignant parts. Okay. So as I was saying, watch that show, but it also makes me feel good that people have a weak spot in their career. My buddy Rhino was the one who told me my career is not over. And until he said that to me, I was sure it was. Still not back on the radio, still not back doing journalism, but the time might come. He also enjoyed the California party lifestyle Adam Nimoy did. Back to the Adam Nimoy article. They don't specify what that means here. Marijuana abuse. Yeah, they do. Father and son went into recovery. Leonard for alcoholism. I didn't know that about Leonard Nimoy. Alcohol addiction, Adam for marijuana abuse. Which some people say that is not a real thing, but I think most doctors probably say it is a real thing. Here's the thing. Any psychoactive substance that you use that changes how you feel has the potential for some abuse if you can't stop. And that's the thing. Now, some people can stop smoking marijuana. Like I did. I smoked a lot of pot for quite a while, but I don't anymore. For now. I mean, you know, I kind of think someday I might like to enjoy it a little bit more, but I mean, the people who can smoke marijuana and then stop don't understand the people who can't. Often they kind of, just stop, you know, like if you're not a pill popper, you don't know what it's like to be a pill popper. If you're not an alcoholic, you really don't know. If you're just somebody who can take a drink and then be done, that's not what it's like for alcoholics. Alcoholics don't want a drink. They want 15 drinks, you know, and so it's a very different psychological thing. And the people who don't have it really cannot identify, I think. That's my understanding of it anyway. And so I try to be real delicate about that, because a lot of people say, marijuana abuse, you know, what the fuck? There's no such thing. That's just a bunch of bullshit. I don't think it's a bunch of bullshit. I think it's actually really serious. I've known people who sort of have their lives damaged by substances they cannot control. All right, we're halfway through the show. I have not said the number in a while. 310-776-5869. 310-776-Coons is the phone number. Let's finish this. So after the alcoholism and marijuana abuse, they went into recovery, father and son. In the early 2000s, they were estranged. And then they kind of overcame that, I guess. Leonard Nimoy's third act was his life as a family man. Oh yeah, I remember when Adam Nimoy directed the episode I, Robot from The Outer Limits, the new Outer Limits in the 90s on Showtime. I watched that and found that really, really good. Adam developed a greater appreciation of his father, actor, director, activist, and humanist. He did produce a short documentary about his father, his early life on the West End of Boston. Adam called it a love letter to my dad about his youth, and eventually it aired on the local public television channel, WBGH, public TV, good old PBS. It was a great experience to be at the 50th anniversary of Star Trek. Oh, with the 50th anniversary of Star Trek on the horizon, Adam realized he wanted to do it again, but this time with the focus on Spock, not just Leonard Nimoy. Leonard Nimoy loved the idea, but had COPD and was very sick. And so I think that's kind of the sad part. He recognized that, oh, I see. Shoot footage for the documentary. Leonard Nimoy looked at his son and said, "What's your hurry? We have until 2016. Adams, you just said you might not be around much longer. Replied Leonard, I was having a bad day. In fact, Leonard Nimoy was in better spirits and had bounced back. Adam didn't end up shooting that day. 2 months later, Leonard Nimoy died. It happened very quickly for him, mercifully. Outpouring of grief and fandom. Adam knew this was now a personal story about Leonard Nimoy's life and his personal journey. I mean, this article goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Thank you, Mashable, for doing it. I think it could have been a little bit less blah, blah, blah. Anyway. cBasAfterDark. Anything can happen Thursday here. I have another article to tell you about. Did you ever hear about, what was it? The story about, well, why am I showing you my email? That's not what it was supposed to be. It is supposed to be this story. How Back to the Future replaced Eric Stoltz. Did you ever hear the stories about Eric Stoltz playing Marty McFly? He was a second choice. They knew they wanted Michael J. Fox for that role, but they couldn't get him. Like the guy who was doing the Family Ties show, Gary David Goldberg, wouldn't let him out of the shooting schedule. And so they have a couple of weeks worth of footage of him and, you know, Crispin Glover and him and Christopher Lloyd doing these scenes. And only a few weeks into filming, they realized something was wrong. He was a good dramatic actor, but he wasn't bringing the screwball energy the film needed. They came to the studio head, let us fire Stoltz and replace it with Michael J. Fox. But they couldn't because Stoltz was forced to labor on unaware as his days as Marty were numbered. The Making of the Back to the Future Trilogy is a new book. We Don't Need Roads is what it's titled. And the people behind the film reveal what those few odd weeks on set were like. Production kept moving along with the original Marty McFly. Years later, when Eric Stoltz was asked to reflect on his time, he felt like it was a long winter. Perhaps he was remembering the evening of January 7th when art imitated life and Stoltz and Marty's experiences finally became one. The cast and crew shot at Griffith Park. A location production manager, Dennis Jones, hyperbolically noted that at night is the coldest spot in the known universe. Just hours earlier, Zemeckis got the approval to move forward with transitioning to the other actor, Michael J. Fox. Few people knew it at the time, but the actor was soon to be fired, given severance, and sent on his way. That evening, Stoltz shot a scene in the sequence before lightning strikes the clock tower. Marty is at the white starting line, getting ready to take off in his time machine. He slams on the gas, but nothing happens. Ultimately, he slams his head into the center of the steering wheel in exasperation. The car starts, and he prepares to drive. He looks ahead, throws the car into gear, and cut. Thank you, Marty. We'll take it from here. The actor got out of the car, and the stunt double took his spot, presumably to complete the journey while Stoltz waited on the sidelines. The next day, they went to the Puente Hills Mall, which is the Lone Pine or Twin Pines Mall in the movie. And it's in the City of Industry in L.A. The cast and crew were scheduled to shoot the scene with the time machine's first temporal displacement, where Doc sends his dog a minute into the future. The crew continued to accumulate largely irrelevant footage of Stoltz, unknowingly practicing for Fox's turn at the take, as unit photographer Ralph Nelson snapped photographs that would remain under lock and key for decades. Doomsday came just 48 hours later. The majority of those called to the mall that night had no reason to suspect that this shoot would be any different from the ones that preceded it. The lead actor arrived on set at 5:30 p.m., went to hair and makeup, Vulture.com, preceded. He then proceeded to go in front of the cameras for his final time, presumably to feed lines to Christopher Lloyd, who was playing Doc Brown. The production manager, Dennis Jones, filled out a report on each shooting day with codes listed to represent how each actor's time was spent. In the column for Stoltz, Jones wrote the letter F in black ballpoint. In this case, it stood for finished, but a number of other words could have stood in its place, fired being among the most gentle. It was decided beforehand that members of the production team would let the principal cast know about the change slightly in advance of the big announcement to the crew. Bob Gale spoke to Crispin Glover, George McFly, and Biff, Thomas F. Wilson, while Neil Canton was responsible for telling Christopher Lloyd and Leah Thompson. Frank Marshall and Kathleen Kennedy called Eric Stoltz's agents. Robert Zemeckis broke the news to Stoltz himself. What I understand is that Stoltz, at least what I've understood up until now, I'm reading this kind of quote for the first time, Stoltz also kind of wanted out, realized that it was not working. So let's see. Exactly what transpired between the two has been kept between the two of them. Zemeckis acknowledges the actor took the news hard, as was to be expected. For Canton, the night he had assumed would be filled with unhappiness got off to a surprisingly lighthearted start when he received a much-needed laugh from Christopher Lloyd. I knew Chris because we'd worked together on Buckaroo Banzai. He was funny. When I told Chris that we were going to be replacing Eric in the film, he looked at me and said, "Well, who's Eric?" I said, "Marty." He said, "Oh, I thought his name was really Marty." To this day, he says, "I don't know if Christopher Lloyd was pulling his leg or not." Canton's amusement came from the fact that on set, Stoltz adhered to his method acting instruction and refused to answer to his real name, to the frustration and eye rolls of many of the crew. We almost always called him Marty, those on the production team say. We thought it was silly, according to Bob Gale, but we figured if we helped him do his job that way, it was harmless. There were a few people who'd worked on Mask, and they called him Rocky, the name of his character in that film. While Lloyd may or may not have realized this was simply Stoltz's way of staying in character, Tom Wilson was clear that Eric Stoltz was his name, and being a pain in the ass was his game. The origin of the frequently awkward and hostile working relationship between Stoltz and Wilson can be traced back to when the former was required to push the latter while filming the scene in the school cafeteria. Okay, yeah, when Biff pushes Marty, right? According to Wilson, the lead used all his force, take after take, unwilling to play pretend. So yeah, Eric Stoltz was pushing Biff. Okay, right, they push each other. Despite repeated requests from Wilson to take it easy, Stoltz didn't, forcing the heels of his hands into the supporting actor's collarbone with increasing strength. Action, push, cut. Again, action, push, cut. Again, action, push, cut. Again, action. The result was a perfect shot and a number of bruises on Wilson's collarbone. A score had been created, and the bully of Hill Valley High was seeking to settle it in a few weeks. Wilson, who was appearing in his first major motion picture, it was the first thing the actor who played Biff had done. He'd had a small role in an indie film that he was eager to forget. He felt he was in no position to complain to the director, but made a mental note to retaliate when they get around to the scene when Biff punches Marty at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. Wilson would never have his chance to deliver Stoltz's comeuppance. It was bittersweet for Leah Thompson. She said it was hard for her because she was really good friends with Eric. He's such a different actor, and he could be very difficult. It was a time when we were emerging from the 70s. It was 84 or 85 by then, wasn't it? All the young actors wanted to be De Niro and Pacino. Now a lot of young actors are just like businessmen. It was a different time, but it was not the right movie to behave like that. Eric had such an intensity. He saw drama in things. He wasn't really a comedian, and they needed a comedian. Well, that's kind of what... at least they realized it, right? Like, at least they sort of were aware. As disappointed as she was to hear that he was being removed from the project, the news did come as a small relief, especially considering her own minor indiscretions at the time of filming. Her boyfriend was Dennis Quaid. He was overseas making a movie. I had a week or two off, so I slipped away against the rules after I was explicitly told not to leave town. I was in Munich. That was a long time ago, so I called my answering machine just to check in. It was like Beep, this is Steven Spielberg. Beep, this is Frank Marshall. Beep, this is Bob Zemeckis. Beep. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm getting fired. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. They found out that I ran out of town and I'm in trouble. I was trying to get a plane ticket until I finally talked to Neil and he told me what happened. That's funny. I like that story. I was just super relieved it wasn't me, she continues, still laughing. I disobeyed the rules. They wouldn't remember that because I never told them I was out of town. Ah, that's funny. She just, as far as they were concerned, she was just unreachable or whatever. Some of the actors who worked most closely with Stoltz had a feeling something was off kilter within a week. Tom Wilson remembers there being an off atmosphere and uncomfortable buzz around the set in the first few days of '85. Christopher Lloyd also had a sense that things were not clicking the way they should have been. I felt for Eric. He was a really good actor. Although he was doing the part well, he was not bringing that element of comedy. They all seemed to be saying the same thing. They needed comedy, and they weren't getting it. There were signs, especially the last week or so. Cundy, I don't know who Cundy is, one of the people on the crew. We'd set up a shot, and we'd shoot Chris Lloyd's angle. We wouldn't do the reverse on Marty. I'd say, don't we need the angle? And Bob would say, no, let's not worry about that. Yeah, that's a sign. It didn't take long for me to see we were saving our energy for what would come next. I got a phone call from the producers. Production designer Larry Paul says, I don't remember if it was Bob Gale or Neil Canton saying basically, don't change the set from 1955. They said they weren't done with it. There may be some changes. They couldn't go into it any further, but stop what you're doing. I guess he was already in the process of making it from 1955 to 1985. Formal announcement came after the late night lunch break around 10:30 p.m. After Zemeckis dismissed Stoltz from the set, the cast and crew were assembled. Everybody was present, all the big wigs. Frank Marshall, Kathleen Kennedy, Bob Gale, Neil Canton, Steven Spielberg. An unusual show of force that tipped everyone off that something serious was going on. It's probably going to be shocking, kind of good news, kind of bad news. The crowd was starting to grow uneasy. I'll give you the bad news. We're going to reshoot most of the movie because we've changed the cast and there's going to be a new Marty, Michael J. Fox. The director saw the reactions. They weren't gleeful, per se, but they didn't seem to be as angry or worried as he had feared. Someone from the crowd shouted, that's certainly not the bad news. Okay, well, then that's the good news. I guess the other good news is we're going to continue on. He paused. So it's only good news and good news. I like that article, because very often, and I mean, I kind of wax philosophical about this the way I wax philosophical about my career when I hear, Leonard Nimoy had trouble once. Oh, no, boo-hoo. Well, yeah, he had trouble once, and now I'm having some trouble myself. And thank God, even the people I look up to kind of had trouble. But yeah, even the movies we love, it almost didn't get made, or certainly didn't almost get made the way they came out. You know what I'm saying? Like, it would have been a very different movie, Back to the Future would have, with Eric Stoltz. It would have been, you hear about the stuff that Star Trek 1 went through. Star Trek the Motion Picture was not an easy movie to make. And I guess like the writer had to keep quitting and somebody higher up in Paramount had to keep coming each time and sort of getting him back. Leonard Nimoy, Gene Roddenberry would rewrite scenes that the writer had written in the screenplay and not note that he had rewritten them. And so they were worse, like they turned out shitty. And when people would be like, well, what the fuck? They go to the writer, what the fuck? And he's like, I didn't write this. This is not what I wrote. Somebody changed it. Guess what? It was Gene Roddenberry. And it turns out that, as much as we love Gene Roddenberry for being the idea guy, he wasn't really the best writer. And Star Trek got better when he was unceremoniously pushed to the side and people other than him were in charge of what went on in Star Trek. Okay. Let's shift gears a little bit. It's cBaS After Dark. Anything can happen Thursday. 310-776-COONS is the number. Area code 310-776-5869. You will call on this very phone right here. And I will talk to you live on the air. Or you can send me your Periscope comments if you're watching live or on tape later. If you're watching live or on tape on YouTube or Google+, please comment. Please send me a tweet. I absolutely don't like this to be a monologue. I love it when I get calls or comments, and I absolutely will answer back. Hey, here's a good one. Using guns in self-defense. The NRA always says guns in self-defense, right? Got to have guns because of the Second Amendment. And hey, what would have happened if blah, blah, blah? Well, guess what? It's not nearly as common as we thought. If you're a conservative, you're not going to like this, but here's the kind of scientific study truth. American gun owners are far more likely to injure themselves or someone else with their firearm than stop a criminal. It's the Violence Policy Center. I mean, I guess they're not scientifically unbiased, but 258 justifiable homicides involving civilians from 2012. That sounds like a good thing, and it is. 258 justifiable homicides involving civilians using firearms, compared to 8,342 murders by a gun. That's like a gigantic difference. Even if a criminal isn't shot down, the study found civilians rarely use guns to protect themselves. Intended victims of property crimes engaged in self-protective behavior with a firearm not 1% of the time, 0.1% of the time. They use FBI and Bureau of Justice data. The Violence Policy Center say the report disproves the premise of arguments, and we've all suspected it, right? Unless you're a card-carrying member of the fucking NRA, you know that they fluff up the statistics, which they don't even really have statistics. They just fluff up the idea. The NRA, they say here, has staked its entire agenda on the claim that guns are necessary for self-defense. But the gun industry propaganda has no basis in fact. And in fact, that's kind of a good sentence to read, because it very likely is gun industry propaganda. The companies that make guns make a lot of fucking money. Guns are far more likely to be used in a homicide than in a justifiable homicide by a private citizen. In fact, a gun is far more likely to be stolen than used in self-defense. That's the other thing you never hear about. People who get stolen guns had them stolen from somewhere. And the person whose gun was stolen is, I don't know. Roughly 22,000 people die accidentally from a gun or use a gun to commit suicide. Gun rights advocates say they have many statistics claiming people are safer thanks to the Second Amendment. Cato Institute, which I sometimes like, maintains a map showing where a firearm has successfully stopped a crime. Oh, let's click on that map for a second. The group says there are many unreported incidents in which a would-be criminal flees when a civilian brandishes a gun. How do they know? They don't say. So here's the map. And it looks very impressive. I will say that. It looks very impressive, right? These are what? Supposedly all of the cases where a gun has been used in self-defense successfully. The map is not comprehensive. They say that right here in the first thing. The map is not comprehensive. Criminals will often flee with no shots fired, no injuries, no suspect. News organizations may report nothing at all. Yeah, blame it on the news. It's important to remember news reports can only provide us with an imperfect picture of defensive gun use in America. That sounds like a cop-out to me. Anyway. Claims that guns are used millions of times each year in self-defense are untrue, according to the Harvard Injury Control Research Center, which also found firearms are far more often used to intimidate than in self-defense. It helps the firearms industry. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I'm not anti-gun, but I'm anti-idiots with guns, and frankly, most of the people in NRA are not intellectually prone. They're not members of Mensa. It's not like guns are bad. It's the people that are bad, but I'm saying it's not just the criminals that are bad. I'm saying it's also the fucking card-carrying NRA Second Amendment nut jobs who believe that guns above all else, and, guns don't kill people, people kill people, blah, 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 blah. And, I think we all know it's nonsense. I think even the NRA knows it at some point, but they like it, so they don't ballyhoo it. I wouldn't either if I was on that side. You don't ballyhoo something that disproves your theory. All right. Last story. And where is it? Because I've done a lot of stories about the IRS. The IRS workers that avoid taxes, the IRS phone line that hangs up on you, and like millions of other people, because they got a much higher rate of calls this year than the previous years, and they just were not able to take all of the calls for help that people were doing. Anyway. And by the way, there's another argument for tax code revision, probably. And I mean, this is one of the ways in which I kind of agree with the conservative people. I don't know how the revision should go, but I do know the current system is bullshit. And on the other hand, who was the guy? It wasn't Donald Trump. One of the recent conservative dudes running for Republican Party presidential nomination was saying, which one was it? I can't remember. But he was like, I was just in Uganda or something like that, and I did my taxes in 15 minutes. Or people do their taxes in 15 minutes kind of a thing. I was like, whatever. I don't remember even what I exactly thought, but I remember thinking distinctly, whatever. Like, just, I don't even understand. I don't even know what to say about that. The IRS reportedly erased backups of Tea Party emails after the main ones were lost, and they knew they were meant to be kept, but they erased them anyway. Good old folks at MSN reporting from the Associated Press. IRS employees erased computer backup tapes a month after officials discovered thousands of emails related to the Tea Party scandal had been lost. Okay. The investigators, however, concluded the employees erased the tapes by mistake and not as a part of an attempt to destroy evidence. Do we believe that? My instinct is like, fuck no, you don't believe that. But I don't know. I mean, it seems like the investigators ought to be impartial, but I just find that really rings false. As many as 24,000 emails were lost because 422 backup tapes were erased, according to J. Russell George, the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration. How'd you like that to be your title? Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration. I'm J. What is it with these guys in the first initial J? J. Russell George. J. Edgar Hoover. Ah, yes. My first initial is J. I shall go into public service. The revelation is likely to fuel conspiracy theories among conservatives who say the IRS obstructed congressional investigations. J. Russell George is scheduled to testify before the House Oversight Committee Thursday morning. I guess that was this morning. AAP has obtained a copy of his prepared testimony. The IRS had no immediate comment last night. George set off a firestorm with an audit in 2013 that said IRS agents improperly singled out Tea Party and other conservative groups for extra scrutiny when they applied for tax-exempt status. Several hundred groups had their applications delayed for a year or more. Some were asked inappropriate questions about donors and group activities. The lost emails were to and from Lois Lerner, who used to head the IRS division that processes applications for tax-exempt status. In June 2014, the IRS told Congress it had lost an unknown number of her emails when her computer hard drive crashed in 2011. All right. Hard drive crashes happen. The IRS had discovered the emails were lost in February 2014. A total of 422 computer backup tapes were erased a month later. The workers were unaware of the 2013 directive from the chief technology officer to stop destroying email backup tapes. The IRS says it has produced 78,000 learner emails, many of which have been made public by congressional investigators. George says his investigators were able to recover more than 1,000 additional learner emails. However, as many as 24,000 emails. I don't think I've sent 24,000 emails in my life. Like, that's fucking insane. Maybe I mean, it's hard to say. Like, how many emails have you sent? Do you even know? Like, I really have trouble thumbnailing that number, but I feel like 24,000? Have I even been alive 24,000 days? Hold on. Okay, let's see. I'm going to pull up my calculator on the old smartphone here really fast, because if I have sent one email a day, and I don't think I have, I was alive a number of years before I had email, before there was email, and then there have been many days in my life where I didn't send any email. Where's the calculator? Here we go. Okay. 365 times the number of years I've been alive. We don't need to show. Let's just say it's under 20,000 by a few thousand. And so if I sent an email a day, even in the years when there was not email, that would not total that. Now, some people send 5 or 6 emails a day, so I suppose it's not impossible, but goddamn, 24,000 emails. Oh, wait. Well, this does not say they were all from him, or, you know, they could have been emails to him or who is, I guess, her, Lois Lerner, right? The woman. Back to the story here on Google and YouTube. After the initial report, much of the agency's top leadership was forced to retire or resign, including Lois Lerner. I just like saying the name, Lois Lerner. Justice Department and several congressional committees launched investigations. Lerner emerged as a central figure in the controversy after she refused to answer questions at 2 House oversight hearings, invoking her Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate herself. At the first hearing, she made a statement saying she'd done nothing wrong. Last year, the House voted mostly along party lines to hold her in contempt of Congress. So, it's easy, and I feel the same sort of temptation I think most people feel to kind of lean one way, or lean the way that you lean politically in a story like that, right? If you're a conservative Republican type person, of course she destroyed the emails on purpose, and of course they were directed to destroy those email tapes, and of course, and then on the other side of the coin is if you're a liberal or if you're a Democrat, you think, of course they didn't, of course there was an accidental deletion, and of course they weren't trying to do anything wrong, and of course, I don't know which I feel, because I feel like both parties are kind of shit. I certainly feel both parties are shit, right? I feel like most people who align themselves with liberal or conservative are probably full of shit too, because I feel like nobody really is in one camp on all those issues. I feel, I would love for there to be smaller government and less involvement in people's lives. And the conservative Republican people are like, yes, smaller government, except for banning gay marriage. Okay, yeah, we gotta control what marriage is if you're a Republican, because if you're a Republican, you're religious, and if you're religious, that means standing up for marriage. And I mean, this institution of American life where 50% of people undo it when they're married for a while. I don't know. I didn't want this to be an angry, political rant. The point is, I'm not sure which side I come down on that story. I guess more information is needed. And that's such an unsatisfying end to a show, isn't it? Such an unsatisfying answer at the conclusion of a thing. Kind of at the end of the hour, if you have any last-minute things to mention, drop them on the comments over here on the Periscope. Drop them in the comments here on YouTube and Google. Send me a text at the number on your screen. Send me a tweet at the address on your screen. I'm going to wrap things up. It's been a wonderful week. I'll be back on Saturday night at this same time with the fast food, junk food podcast and extravaganza. Don't know if my partner will be joining me. She seems to have a life now, and on Saturday nights, that means I'm kind of stuck doing the show myself. But it's important to do it live. We'll do it live! I'm Bill O'Reilly. It's important, though, to do that show live. I feel like keep it consistent at the same time every week so people can find it. On the other hand, if you're a believer in the time-shifting thing, podcasts and viewers watching when they want, live is not as important. So, I don't know. I know tomorrow's Friday. I'm going to take Friday off. Actually, I have a fucking job fair to go to. Do you guys like job fairs? I don't like job hunting. Nobody does. But, a job fair is, particularly excruciating. You got to dress up and bring your resume and put on your face. And it's like, fuck you. I hate job fairs. But unfortunately, I think it'll be a kind of a fast thing. It's for teachers, not for, anything I really want to be doing. But, hey, I'll let you know how it goes on Saturday or Monday. Join me for Nerd News Monday. I've been saving up a lot of good nerd stories that we're going to bring to you. In fact, let me just tease a couple of them before I go off the air. Nerd news. Yes. Let's see here. What does it mean to be verified? I was actually going to do that story tonight, but I didn't really have time for it. There's people who have verified accounts on Twitter, verified accounts on YouTube, verified videos. What does that mean, and how do you get it? I want to explore that. A guy I know who invented a toy that was sort of a Spider-Man related toy lost at the Supreme Court level, and the Supreme Court was actually quoting Spider-Man in the decision, which is pretty funny. Satirist was fired by Al Jazeera. That's not really a nerd news story. That's more for Media Watch. The power plant in Arizona that is fueling America's drought. Evaporation used to power tiny little engines. We will look at that. A whole bunch of good stories in the news. Galaxy has been named after the sexiest soccer star in the world, Cristiano Ronaldo. And I don't know, using guns in self-defense is rare. We did that. The IRS backup delete. Oh, yes, and the glowing condom that changes color if you have an STD. All that and more coming up on Monday on Seabass After Dark, here on Google, on YouTube, here on Periscope. For now, I'm Seabass. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you Saturday for the fast food, junk food extravaganza. Good night.